Two freezing little girls beg a security guard not to throw them out of a luxury hotel, but when the billionaire owner sees it, everything in his life changes forever. Snow fell in slow, heavy flakes against the glittering glass facade of the Harrington Grand Hotel, a place where only the wealthiest guests walked through the gold-framed doors. Inside, warmth and luxury wrapped the lobby like a velvet curtain, but on the outside steps stood two little girls, identical twins, no older than 5, shivering beneath the December wind. Their blonde hair was tangled with snow, their cheeks were flushed from cold, and their blue eyes, so bright by nature, now looked dim with exhaustion. One wore a red puffy jacket zipped to the chin, the other a pink one that was too thin for the freezing night. Their jeans were stiff with frost, their fingers trembling inside worn mittens as they pressed close to one another, searching for warmth that simply wasn't there. Their names were Lily and Sophie Carter, and they had nowhere else to go. The girls had been wandering the city for hours, trying to escape the biting wind, trying to stay together, trying to be brave. Their mother was gone. Their home was gone. The world that had once been small, safe, and filled with the scent of warm pancakes had crumbled overnight. They had tried a shelter, but it was full. They had tried asking a man in a grocery store for help, but he yelled at them to leave. Now they stood before the towering hotel because they saw lights, warmth, and people who looked like they belonged to another world, one they desperately wished would let them step inside for just a moment. The lobby doors opened, releasing a wave of warm air that made the twins gasp. But before they could move forward, a tall, broad security guard stepped into their path. His name badge read Carl, and his expression hardened the moment he saw them. "Hey," he snapped, lowering his voice so guests inside wouldn't hear. "What do you two think you're doing here?" Sophie swallowed hard and looked at Lily, urging her silently to speak. Lily stepped forward with a timid but hopeful expression. "Sir," she whispered, her breath forming small clouds in the cold air, "please, don't make us leave. We're cold, and we're hungry. We just want to be warm for a little bit." Carl scoffed, folding his arms across his chest. "This isn't a playground. Or a charity. This hotel is not a place for beggars." Sophie flinched at the word, tightening her grip on her sister's hand. "We're not beggars," she said softly, voice trembling. "We just don't have anywhere to sleep tonight." Carl took a step forward, looming over them like a dark wall. "I don't care. You don't belong here. Go find your parents." Lily's eyes filled with tears. She tried desperately to blink away. We don't have any," she whispered. "Not anymore." Their small bodies shook, not just from cold now, but from fear. Snowflakes clung to their eyelashes as they stared up at a man who saw them not as children in need, but as nuisances. Carl reached for the door handle, clearly intending to shove them down the steps if he had to. "I said get out of here. This is not the place for kids like you." But before he could lay a hand on them, another voice cut through the lobby, deep, commanding, and so sharp that Carl froze. "What do you think you're doing?" The security guard stiffened. Slowly, he turned around. The twins followed his gaze and saw a man stepping out of the elevator, a man who looked like he had stepped out of a magazine cover. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell in soft waves and piercing blue eyes that could read a person in a single glance. He wore an elegant navy coat and carried himself with effortless authority. It was Ethan Harrington, the owner of the hotel. He had seen everything. Carl swallowed hard. Mr. Harrington, I was just removing." "Removing what?" Ethan's voice was low and ice-cold. "2 freezing children. Tell me, Carl, did you enjoy threatening a pair of 5-year-old girls?" Carl sputtered, losing his grip on composed professionalism. They're strays. We can't have them here. They lower the image of the hotel." For a moment, the entire lobby seemed to hold its breath. Ethan slowly stepped forward until he stood directly between Carl and the twins. He looked at the guard with a mixture of disgust and disbelief. Did you just say that children, cold, hungry, and alone, don't belong here because they're poor? Carl opened his mouth, but no words came. Ethan didn't need them. Get out, he commanded, his voice cutting like steel. You're finished here. Effective immediately. Carl's face drained of color. Yes, sir. Now. The guard stumbled backward, humiliated, and hurried toward the exit. Only after he disappeared did Ethan turn toward the two little girls. The harsh edge in his expression melted instantly. He lowered himself to one knee, bringing his eyes level with theirs. Are you all right? He asked gently. Lily nodded shakily. Sophie wiped her tears but couldn't bring herself to speak. Ethan's gaze softened even further. No one should ever speak to you the way he did, he said. And no child should be standing outside in the cold tonight. His voice was warm. Honest. Safe. He extended his hands toward them. Come inside, he said softly. You're safe now. The twins hesitated only a moment, then stepped toward him, toward warmth, toward hope, and toward a future they never could have imagined. Ethan guided the twins through the revolving doors and into the warmth of the Harrington Grand's lobby, a place of soft lights, marble floors, and towering holiday decorations that shimmered like magic. The contrast between the outside cold and the interior glow made Sophie gasp quietly, while Lily blinked rapidly as if afraid the scene would disappear if she looked for too long. Guests in elegant coats and glittering jewelry glanced at the girls with a mixture of confusion and curiosity, but Ethan sent a single look toward anyone who stared for too long, and the attention faded instantly. His presence carried unmistakable authority, the kind that silenced rooms even when he didn't say a word. The girls sensed it too, they moved closer to him, feeling safer with each step. He led them toward a quiet seating area near the fireplace, where soft armchairs surrounded a large stone hearth burning with crackling orange flames. The heat wrapped around the twins like comforting arms, thawing their stiff fingers and toes. The twins lowered themselves onto the edge of the nearest couch, unsure whether they were allowed to sit fully. Ethan noticed their hesitation and gently pushed the cocoa-colored pillows closer, encouraging them to sink into the warmth rather than sit perched like frightened birds. He signaled to a passing staff member and quietly ordered hot chocolate with marshmallows and something warm to eat. His tone was simple but carried urgency beneath it, as if feeding these children was the most important task of his life. Once the girls were settled, Ethan lowered himself onto one knee again so he could speak to them at eye level. He found himself studying their delicate faces, identical yet distinct in subtle ways. Lily had a slightly braver tilt to her chin, while Sophie's eyes seemed to absorb the entire room with vulnerable caution. Their jackets were thin, their jeans frayed at the bottom, and their little shoes, soaked from snow, steamed faintly as they neared the fire. Can you tell me your names? Ethan asked gently. Lily cleared her throat. I'm Lily, and this is my sister, Sophie. Sophie managed a tiny wave before pressing herself closer to her sister's side. Ethan nodded with a soft smile and repeated their names quietly, committing them to memory. And where are your parents? He asked, though he braced himself for an answer he suspected he wouldn't want to hear. Lily's chin trembled. Our mom, she died last month. Her voice cracked halfway through the sentence, as though saying the words made her relive the moment all over again. Sophie added in a whisper barely louder than the crackling fire, we don't have a dad. Ethan exhaled slowly, the air in his lungs thick with the weight of their loss. He had seen tragedy, he had built an empire from the ashes of a difficult childhood, but hearing such devastating words from the mouths of two tiny girls struck him harder than he expected. He didn't speak right away, giving them time to breathe, to feel heard rather than interrogated. I'm very sorry, he finally said, and it wasn't the polite apology people gave strangers, it was real, heartfelt. The kind that came from someone who knew exactly what it was like to lose a mother too soon. Where have you been staying since then? Lily looked down at her hands, rubbing her thumbs together nervously. We were with someone from the shelter for a little while, but they ran out of space and we didn't want to be separated. They said we might get put in different places. Sophie nodded fiercely, clutching her sister's arm. We're always together, she said. We promised Mama we'd never let go of each other. Ethan felt a sharp pull in his chest. The determination in their small voices reminded him of the vow he once made to himself as a child, to survive, no matter what. He understood their fear with painful clarity. And after the shelter, he asked softly. We tried some places, Lily murmured, eyes filling again. They told us to leave. People don't like when kids come inside without parents. We walked a long time, Sophie added, leaning her head against Lily's shoulder. We were cold. And hungry. At that moment the server returned with 2 large mugs of hot chocolate and a plate stacked with warm pastries. The sweet scent filled the air, and Sophie's stomach growled softly, causing her to blush in embarrassment. Ethan nodded to the girls, encouraging them to take what they wanted. They hesitated for only a second before grabbing the mugs with tiny trembling hands, sipping cautiously at first, then more eagerly. Chocolate smeared Sophie's upper lip, and Lily's eyes fluttered half-closed at the warmth spreading through her. Watching them, Ethan realized he hadn't felt anything like this in a long time. An unexpected sense of responsibility, yes, but something deeper too, a fierce protective instinct he didn't know he still possessed. The very thought of these 2 children wandering alone in the freezing night made his jaw tighten. When they finished eating, Lily wiped her mouth with the back of her sleeve and looked at Ethan with a sincerity that made him forget the polished marble floors and crystal chandeliers around them. Thank you, she said quietly. We didn't think anyone would help us. Most people don't even see us. Ethan reached out, brushing a stray blonde curl away from her face with a tenderness he didn't expect to feel. I see you, he said, his voice steady but warm. And I'm not going to let anything happen to you. Sophie blinked up at him slowly, as if trying to decide whether to believe him. She leaned closer, her small voice trembling. Are you going to send us away too? The question struck him with startling force. It felt like a plea buried beneath layers of fear. Ethan shook his head. No, he said, his tone firm enough to silence her doubt. I won't send you away. Not tonight. Not ever, unless you're going somewhere safe, somewhere better than wandering alone in the cold. Lily exhaled shakily, and Sophie reached for Ethan's hand, small fingers curling around his. Something in that touch, so trusting, so fragile, changed him in an instant. A man who had spent years building luxury, power, and distance now found his heart rearranging itself around 2 trembling children who needed him more than anyone had in years. And in that quiet moment, Ethan Harrington made a silent promise he knew he would not break. These girls would not suffer again. Not while he was alive. Ethan didn't allow the twins to return to the cold that night or to the uncertainty that had become their entire world. Instead, after they finished their hot chocolate and their tiny bodies stopped shaking, he rose from the couch and extended his hand to them once more, a quiet invitation wrapped in warmth and authority. Lily took it first, cautiously but willingly, and Sophie followed a heartbeat later, gripping her sister's sleeve for reassurance. He led them through the hotel as curious guests whispered, wondering why the usually distant and imposing owner of the Harrington Grand was walking through his own lobby hand in hand with 2 small children. They entered the private elevator, one only executives and high-profile guests used. The twins looked around in silent awe at the mirrored walls and soft lighting, eyes wide as if they had stepped inside a magic portal rather than a machine. As the doors slid shut, Sophie's voice, small and fragile, broke the quiet. Where are we going? Ethan lowered himself slightly to meet her gaze. To a room, he said gently. A warm one. With beds you can sleep in tonight. Lily's eyes sparkled with a mixture of hope and disbelief. A real bed? Not the floor, or the bench, Or the alley? He felt the breath leave his chest at the matter-of-fact way she listed places no child should ever have to sleep. Yes, he replied quietly. A real bed. The elevator chimed, and the doors opened onto the top floor, reserved for penthouse suites. He guided the twins down the plush hallway to a door at the very end. The suite he had chosen for them was one he typically reserved for foreign dignitaries or high-paying clients, a space larger than most apartments, with 2 bedrooms, a living area, and a gas fireplace already flickering softly in the corner. When he opened the door and stepped back to let them enter first, the twins froze. Sophie clutched Lily's hand, terrified of doing something wrong. Lily took one hesitant step inside, blinking slowly as she took in the warm light, the carpet so soft her feet sank into it, the fireplace, the enormous bed draped with snow-white linens, and the small Christmas tree in the corner decorated with golden lights. This is for us," Sophie whispered, unable to believe it. "For tonight and for as long as you need it," Ethan said, gently closing the door behind them. The girls wandered deeper into the suite as if afraid the luxury would vanish if they moved too quickly. Lily approached the bed, pressing her palm into the soft blankets, then looking back at Ethan as if silently asking permission. He nodded, and that single gesture was all she needed. She scrambled up onto the mattress, sinking into it with wide-eyed amazement. Sophie followed but sat carefully at first, her posture stiff with lingering fear. A knock at the door signaled the arrival of a hotel maid carrying 2 new sets of pajamas, soft fleece ones with little snowflakes, and a tray with soup, sandwiches, and warm bread. Ethan thanked her quietly, and once she left, he carried the tray to the small dining table. The twins watched him with a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty until he smiled and motioned them closer. "You should eat while it's warm." They didn't need to be told twice. Lily reached for a sandwich immediately, but Sophie hesitated, looking at her hands as if afraid they were too dirty to touch clean food. Ethan noticed and walked to the bathroom to grab a warm towel. He returned and knelt before her, gently wiping her small fingers clean. Sophie watched him, stunned by the gesture, her eyes filling with a strange mix of confusion and relief. When he finished, she swallowed hard and whispered, "Nobody ever did that for us before." Ethan's throat tightened. "Then they should have," he said softly. "You deserve to be cared for." The twins ate quickly at first, driven by hunger that had gnawed at them for days, but then slowed as their bodies relaxed and warmth settled over them. Ethan sat nearby, not eating, simply observing with a strange heaviness in his chest. It wasn't pity, he despised pity. It was something else. Something deeper. After dinner, he helped them into their pajamas. They stood in front of him, tiny and fragile, looking far too small for the sorrow they carried. Lily tugged at the sleeve of her new pajama top. "These are the softest clothes ever," she said quietly. "Like clouds." Sophie nodded in agreement, though she seemed on the verge of tears rather than joy. Ethan recognized that look, the way trauma lingered even in comfort. He gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're safe now," he assured her. But Sophie whispered, almost too quietly to hear, "Are we really?" The question hit Ethan harder than he expected. He knelt down again so he could look both girls in the eyes. "Yes," he said, with a certainty that surprised even him. "You're safe here. I won't let anything happen to you." They stared at him for a long moment, searching for truth in his expression. And when they found it, their small bodies seemed to soften. Lily climbed back onto the enormous bed and curled under the blanket as naturally as if she had done so 1,000 times. Sophie followed more slowly, settling beside her sister but keeping one eye on Ethan as if making sure he wasn't going to disappear. He dimmed the lights, leaving only the glow of the fireplace to illuminate the room. He wasn't used to reading bedtime stories or tucking children in, but he found himself drawn toward the bed almost instinctively. He pulled the blanket gently up to their shoulders. Can you stay until we fall asleep?" Lily asked, her voice small with vulnerability. Ethan nodded, pulling a chair closer and sitting beside them. "I'll stay." The twins curled together, holding each other tightly as if afraid sleep might separate them. Their breathing slowed, and soon they drifted into a deep, much-needed rest. Ethan watched them for a long time, the fire reflecting in his eyes. He wasn't sure when it happened, whether it was when he saw them on the steps outside, when he fired Carl, or when he knelt to wipe Sophie's hands, but somewhere tonight, something inside him shifted. He realized that he didn't just feel sorry for the girls. He felt responsible for them. Protective of them. And as he sat beside their bed, watching the steady rise and fall of their small chests, he made a silent vow he knew he wouldn't break. For Lily and Sophie Carter, this would be the last night they ever fell asleep afraid. When morning sunlight spilled into the penthouse suite, it arrived gently, brushing across the blankets where Lily and Sophie slept curled together like two small kittens. The night had been the first in weeks, maybe months, where they slept without waking in fear, without clutching each other in panic, without the icy bite of the streets pressing into their bones. Their breaths were even and soft, their faces peaceful instead of strained. Ethan stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching them with an expression he hadn't worn in years, quiet wonder mixed with fierce protectiveness. He wasn't accustomed to seeing innocence up close. It made something inside him twist in a way he hadn't expected. He stepped carefully to the window and pulled the curtains open wider, allowing warm light to fill the room. The fire had burned down to embers, and the soft crackle added to the calm atmosphere. When he turned back, he noticed Lily stirring first. She blinked sleepily, confusion flickering across her face before memory returned. She sat up slowly and looked around, then sighed with visible relief. Sophie woke moments later, rubbing her eyes with small fists, then instantly reaching for her sister to confirm she was still there. It was a habit born of fear, one Ethan saw clearly even without them saying a word. "Good morning," he said softly, not wanting to startle them. Two pairs of blue eyes lifted toward him, blinking in the glow of morning light. For a moment the twins simply stared, as if unsure whether he was real or part of a dream. Lily was the first to smile, a small, tentative expression, but Sophie's lips trembled, her eyes filling quickly with overwhelmed emotion. Did you stay here all night?" Sophie asked in a timid voice. "Yes," Ethan replied, pulling the chair closer and sitting beside their bed. "I promised I wouldn't leave until you were asleep. And I didn't want you waking up alone." The twins exchanged a quiet look, one of those silent conversations only siblings share, and Ethan watched it unfold with a strange ache in his chest. They were scared of being abandoned again. Scared of trusting. Scared of losing even this small moment of stability. Lily tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and asked, Are we still allowed to be here?" "Of course you are," he said, softening his voice further. "You're not going anywhere until you're safe. I meant what I told you last night." Sophie's shoulders loosened a little, and she played nervously with the edge of the blanket. "Most people don't keep promises," she murmured. Ethan felt the words hit him harder than they should have. "Then they weren't the right people," he said. "But I keep mine." Before the girls could respond, a gentle knock sounded at the door, followed by a staff member entering with a breakfast cart. The smell of warm pancakes, scrambled eggs, berries, and honey drifted across the room. The twins inhaled as if they were smelling real food for the first time in forever. Their eyes widened, and Ethan felt a pang of frustration toward the world, at how something as simple as breakfast could shock them this much. After thanking the server and letting the door close, he lifted the lid off one of the trays. "I thought you might like something warm," he said. "You can choose anything you want." Lily slid off the bed cautiously, as though afraid the food might vanish if she moved too fast. Sophie followed behind her, but she walked slower, watching Ethan as though waiting for him to scold them or tell them they could only eat a little. When neither happened, she approached the cart shyly. Can we both have pancakes?" she asked. "You can have as many as you want," Ethan said. "There's no limit here." He saw the exact moment the word struck Sophie, like she didn't fully understand them, like the concept of enough was foreign after so much scarcity. Lily sat down at the small dining table and devoured her first pancake so quickly Ethan realized she hadn't eaten a meal like this in far too long. Sophie took slower bites, pausing after each one to ensure no one would take the plate away. He waited patiently for her to relax, and eventually she did, allowing herself to enjoy the food without fear. As they ate, Ethan leaned back in his chair and studied them with a more analytical eye than before, not coldly, but thoughtfully. He had faced mergers, acquisitions, corporate battles, and international negotiations, yet nothing had prepared him for the immense responsibility of caring for two fragile children who had entered his life by accident, or fate. He wasn't yet sure which. When breakfast was finished, Lily dabbed her mouth with a napkin in a comically elegant way she had probably seen adults do in restaurants. "What happens now?" she asked, looking at Ethan with far more maturity than a 5-year-old should ever need. The question lingered heavily in the air. Ethan folded his hands together, choosing his words carefully. "Now," he said, "I make sure you have everything you need today: warm clothes, food, a place to rest." He paused, seeing the fear return in Sophie's eyes. "And I'll figure out what comes after with people who can help." "You mean, people who might take us away?" Sophie asked quietly. Ethan shook his head immediately, his voice firm. "Not without my involvement. I won't let anyone separate you from each other, and I won't let anything unsafe happen to you." Lily exchanged another glance with her sister, but this one was different from earlier. There was hope in it. Real hope. The twins finished eating, and Ethan showed them the bathroom with warm towels and a bathtub. For a moment the girls just stared at the tub, unsure what to do. Then Lily touched the warm water pouring from the faucet and gasped, a sound so full of innocent awe that Ethan nearly smiled. Sophie hesitated, glancing at Ethan as though asking permission. "It's all right," he said gently. "You can take your time." He stepped out and closed the door, giving them privacy, but he could still hear their quiet giggles echoing faintly, soft, hesitant laughter that hadn't been heard from them in a long time. While they bathed, Ethan walked to the window and looked out at the sprawling city below. Snow dusted the rooftops and streets, bright and cold. He thought about the twins wandering through that cold alone, lost and desperate, and something inside him hardened into resolve. It wasn't logical and it wasn't planned, but the truth settled in him with startling clarity. Those girls had been invisible to everyone else. But not to him. He saw them. He heard them. And now, he couldn't walk away. Not after last night. Not after this morning. Not after realizing how deeply they needed someone to fight for them. And perhaps, though he hesitated to admit it even to himself, how deeply he needed someone to fight for. When the bathroom door finally opened and two clean, towel-wrapped heads poked out with shy smiles, Ethan already knew. Lily and Sophie Carter had walked into his hotel by accident. But they would not be leaving his life by accident. Their presence had already changed everything. The moment the twins emerged from the bathroom wrapped in oversized hotel towels, their faces clean and pink from the heat, Ethan knew things were about to get more complicated. Lily's damp hair clung to her cheeks in soft curls while Sophie's blonde strands stuck up in uneven wisps, giving her an almost fragile appearance that made Ethan's chest tighten. They looked younger like this, small and breakable, and for a moment he wondered how anyone, especially the world they'd been pushed into, could ever have been so cruel to them. He brought them new clothes, simple cotton leggings, warm sweaters, and thick socks, all purchased within the hour by an assistant he trusted. The twins dressed themselves shyly, unsure how to act in a place where things were handed to them rather than taken away. Once they were dressed, Ethan sat beside them on the couch, and the air between them changed. He could feel they were bracing for something, shrinking back into that instinct of survival that told them good things never lasted. He didn't have to wait long to understand why. There was a knock on the suite door, followed by the soft voice of his assistant. "Sir, they're here." Ethan's expression shifted, and the twins sensed it instantly. Lily grabbed Sophie's hand, and Sophie's fingers dug into her sister's palm. Their eyes searched Ethan's face with desperate fear. "Who's here?" Lily whispered, her voice trembling. "Did we do something wrong?" "No," Ethan said immediately. He lowered himself to their level and took their joined hands gently. "You did nothing wrong. But I do need to speak with some people who are here to help make sure you're safe." Sophie shook her head with growing panic. "People always say that, and then they take us away." Lily's chin quivered. "Will they separate us? Please, don't let them take us to different places." Ethan felt a surge of anger, cold, protective, and directed entirely at whatever system had instilled this fear into two tiny children. "No one is going to separate you," he said with a firmness that surprised even him. "Not while I'm here." The dread in their eyes didn't disappear, but it faltered. The knock came again, and Ethan stood slowly, squeezing their hands before stepping away. "Stay here," he said. "I'll be right back." He opened the door just enough to step out. In the hallway stood two representatives from Child Protective Services, a woman named Dr. Elena Morris and a social worker named Joel Hartman. Both held folders and carried the calm, clinical air of people who dealt with crisis daily. Dr. Morris spoke first. "Mr. Harrington, thank you for contacting us. We understand the girls were found outside your hotel." "Yes," Ethan said, keeping his voice cold but controlled. "Freezing, starving, and terrified." Joel cleared his throat. "We'll need to speak with them and take them into temporary custody. They're listed as missing minors." Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Do you have any idea what they've been through? They're barely holding themselves together. If you try to take them abruptly, they'll shatter." Dr. Morris softened slightly. "We're not here to harm them. We're here to protect them." Ethan stared at her for a long moment. "Then let me be part of that process. They trust me. If you take them away without preparation, you'll destroy whatever stability they've found in the last 12 hours. Dr. Morris hesitated. "Mr. Harrington, the rules can bend," he said sharply. "If bending them prevents trauma." She exchanged a look with Joel, then sighed. "We can allow you to stay during the initial conversation. But their placement will still need to be determined." Ethan nodded once, then stepped aside to let them in. When they entered the suite, Lily and Sophie instantly pressed themselves into each other, wide-eyed and pale. Ethan walked straight to them and sat down again, making sure they felt his presence anchoring them. "It's okay," he said quietly. "These people aren't here to hurt you." Sophie whimpered. "But they're here to take us." "No," Ethan said firmly. "No one is taking you anywhere unless it's safe and unless I approve it." Dr. Morris approached slowly, crouching down with a gentle smile. "Hello, Lily. Hello, Sophie. My name is Dr. Morris. I'm here to help make sure you're safe." Lily swallowed hard. "We're safe with him," she said, pointing at Ethan without taking her eyes off the social worker. "We don't want to go anywhere else." Sophie nodded fiercely, tears filling her eyes. "Please don't send us away again. We'll be good. We won't bother anyone." That sentence, so small, so desperate, hit Ethan like a punch. The idea that these girls believed safety depended on their behavior made his blood run cold. Dr. Morris's expression softened with sadness. "Sweethearts, we just need to make sure you're taken care of. But you're not in trouble." Ethan placed his hand gently on Sophie's back, grounding her. You don't need to convince them to keep you, he said softly. You're not a burden. Joel Hartman began taking notes, and Ethan noticed how the twins sat straighter, afraid of every motion. Dr. Morris asked about their mother, their time at the shelter, and the night they ended up outside his hotel. Lily did most of the talking, her voice trembling each time she described fear or hunger. Sophie held onto Ethan's sleeve the entire time, as if certain he might vanish without warning. When Dr. Morris finally closed her folder, she looked at Ethan with a thoughtful expression. Mr. Harrington, she said, these girls trust you. And that's rare in cases like this, especially this quickly. Ethan didn't answer. His expression alone conveyed the truth, their trust mattered more to him than he wanted to admit. We will need to arrange placement, Dr. Morris continued carefully. But if you're willing, you can apply for temporary custody. It's a detailed process, and it requires background checks, psychological evaluations, and home assessments. Sophie's grip tightened. Lily whispered, does that mean he can keep us? If everything is approved, Dr. Morris said gently, and if Mr. Harrington wants to. Ethan didn't hesitate. I do want to. The room fell silent except for the soft hum of the fireplace. Lily looked at him with trembling hope. Sophie blinked up at him with watery eyes. You want us? Sophie whispered. Ethan breathed in slowly, the weight of their question sinking into his bones. He reached out and touched each girl's cheek, his voice steady and sincere. Yes, he said. I want you to stay. I want you safe. I want you together. I want you with me. Lily burst into tears first. Sophie followed instantly. And as the twins threw themselves into his arms, clinging to him in a way that felt like trust and desperation and something fragile healing all at once, Ethan wrapped them close and knew. This wasn't charity. This wasn't obligation. This wasn't temporary. Something irreversible had begun. And he wasn't going to walk away. The days that followed were a whirlwind of tension, bureaucracy, and a level of emotional exhaustion Ethan hadn't experienced in years. He faced corporate crises and billion-dollar negotiations with ease, but navigating the world of child welfare was unlike anything he had ever known. Every hour seemed to bring a new requirement, another evaluation, another interview meant to determine whether he was fit to temporarily care for two fragile 5-year-olds who clung to him with the desperate trust of children who had already lost too much. Yet through it all, Lily and Sophie remained by his side. They followed him around the suite like two shadows stitched to his steps, terrified that if they let him out of their sight even for a moment, he might disappear like so many others had in their short lives. Ethan rearranged his entire schedule, canceling meetings and postponing business calls, choosing instead to sit in the living room with the girls, answering their small questions, comforting their sudden tears, and learning just how much fear lived inside such tiny hearts. One night, after a particularly grueling day of meetings with attorneys and social workers, Ethan returned to the suite to find the twins sitting on the floor by the fireplace. They weren't coloring or playing. They sat completely still, shoulders hunched, hands clasped tightly together. When they heard him enter, Lily looked up, and Ethan immediately noticed something different in her expression, something heavy and haunted. Sophie didn't lift her gaze at all, her eyes stayed fixed on the patterned carpet, as if she were bracing herself for something terrible. What's wrong? Ethan asked, moving toward them quickly. Lily bit her lip so hard it went white. We overheard one of the ladies, she whispered. The one who came earlier. Ethan felt tension coil instantly down his spine. What did she say? Sophie finally looked up, her voice barely audible. She said we might get moved tomorrow. To a center. Because nothing is approved yet. Each word seemed to cost her effort, as though speaking them made them more real. Lily's chin trembled, but she lifted it bravely. We don't want to go back there. We don't want to go anywhere. We want to stay with you. Ethan pressed a hand to his forehead for a moment, gathering himself. He had known that placement was undecided. He had known the girls might be moved temporarily before paperwork cleared. But hearing how deeply it frightened them ignited a fierce anger he hadn't felt in years. He knelt in front of them, lowering himself until his eyes were level with theirs. "Look at me," he said softly. Both girls blinked back tears as they met his steady gaze. "No one is taking you anywhere tonight. And they won't take you away tomorrow either, not without me standing between you and that door." Sophie stifled a sob and crawled into his lap. Lily followed instantly, wrapping her arms around his neck. He held both girls tightly, feeling their tiny hearts pounding against him like frightened birds. Their fear was raw and overwhelming, the kind born from too many broken promises and too many nights spent alone. And in that moment, something shifted permanently inside him. Protecting them wasn't just something he wanted, it was something he needed. The next morning came with a new tension in the air. One of the social workers called to schedule a meeting at noon, hinting, too casually, that the twins' placement might be reassessed. Ethan hung up the phone and immediately called his legal team, fury simmering beneath his calm voice. He spent the next 2 hours reviewing legal strategies, demanding every possible avenue be explored to keep the twins in his temporary care. But even that wasn't enough to quiet the dread in Lily and Sophie, who sat together on the couch, their hands intertwined, their eyes watching him with a mix of hope and terror. When noon arrived and the knock sounded at the door, Sophie flinched so hard her shoulders jerked. Lily whispered something to her sister, and Sophie whispered back, but neither let go of the other's hand as Ethan went to answer. Dr. Morris and Joel stepped inside, folders in hand, their expressions unreadable. Lily and Sophie pressed closer together, their bodies taut with fear. "Mr. Harrington," Dr. Morris began gently, "we've reviewed the latest reports. The girl's situation is still in flux. Until your paperwork is fully processed." "No," Ethan interrupted, not raising his voice but letting the force of the word fill the room. "I gave these children my word. They will not be moved to an unfamiliar environment where they will feel abandoned again." Joel shifted uncomfortably. "We understand your concern, but procedures exist for a reason." "Then adjust them," Ethan said sharply. "I'll provide around-the-clock security, in-suite supervision, whatever you require. But I will not let you put them through trauma they may never recover from." Dr. Morris glanced toward the girls, who huddled together on the couch, trembling. Something in her expression softened. She crouched to their level again. "Sweethearts," she said kindly, "no one wants to hurt you. We're just trying to find the best place for you." Lily's voice broke as she whispered, "This is the best place. Please don't take us away again. We won't be safe without him." Something in her tone, so fragile and sincere, seemed to pierce even the practiced professionalism of the social workers. Dr. Morris stood slowly and looked back at Ethan. "Give us a moment to review the situation," she said. They stepped aside, whispering together in low voices. The girls watched with wide, terrified eyes, unable to look away. Ethan sat beside them and wrapped an arm around their shoulders. "Whatever happens," he murmured, "we face it together." Minutes passed. Then Dr. Morris turned back to them, her expression gentler than it had ever been. "For now," she said, "the girls may stay with you under supervised temporary placement until the official hearing." Sophie gasped and covered her mouth. Lily burst into tears, relief shaking her entire body. Ethan exhaled, tension spilling from him like a dam breaking. He hadn't realized how tightly he had been holding his breath until it escaped all at once. The twins launched themselves into his arms, clinging with fierce, overwhelming gratitude. He held them both, closing his eyes as their small hands gripped the fabric of his shirt like an anchor. Something warm and powerful spread through him, something deeper than responsibility. It felt like purpose. Like belonging. Like the start of something he hadn't known he was missing until these two fragile children walked into his hotel and shattered the cold barrier he'd built around his heart. As the social workers left, Ethan looked down at Lily and Sophie and made another silent vow, a vow that now felt woven into every part of him. Whatever battles lay ahead, whatever courts or agencies or bureaucracies he had to face, he would win them. For these two little girls, he would fight the entire world if he had to. They would not be taken away. Not now. Not ever. The following weeks unfolded in a blur of court appointments, interviews, home assessments, background checks, psychological evaluations, and endless paperwork that seemed designed to test not only Ethan's patience but also his determination. Yet through every grueling hour, every challenging conversation, and every hurdle placed in his path, Lily and Sophie remained the constant thread binding it all together. Their presence filled the penthouse suite with an unexpected energy, one that warmed the once sterile, silent rooms and turned them into a home that breathed with life and movement. Ethan found himself coming back each evening not with the heaviness of a businessman returning from battle, but with anticipation, wondering what new milestones or small victories waited for him behind the door. But beneath the laughter and the growing comfort lived a quiet, constant fear. The twins never fully relaxed unless Ethan was in the room. They followed him everywhere, drifting behind him like two fragile comets tied to his orbit. If he stepped out for even a moment, to speak with a lawyer in the hallway or to answer a phone call in the other room, they would freeze, waiting anxiously until he returned. The trauma of uncertainty had etched itself into their bones, and even Ethan's reassurances couldn't erase the scars overnight. One evening, after a long day spent preparing with his legal team for the upcoming custody hearing, Ethan returned to the suite to find the twins curled together beneath a blanket on the couch. The glow of the fireplace illuminated their faces, but neither child looked drowsy. Instead, they looked troubled. Lily was fidgeting with the fringe of the blanket, and Sophie sat perfectly still, staring at the flickering flames with the kind of solemnity no 5-year-old should know. Ethan approached slowly and lowered himself onto the couch beside them. "You're both very quiet," he said gently. Lily glanced at Sophie before answering. "We heard something," she murmured. He felt a tightening in his chest. "What did you hear?" Sophie swallowed hard. "We heard your lawyer say we might have to talk in court. That they might ask us questions. Hard questions." Ethan inhaled, understanding instantly why they looked so shaken. He placed a hand lightly on Sophie's back. "Yes. They may ask you a few questions. But nothing frightening. And I will be right there with you." Sophie began twisting her fingers together anxiously. "What if we say the wrong thing? What if they think we don't belong with you? What if they send us away because we're not good enough?" The words cut so deeply that Ethan felt it physically. He reached for their hands, wrapping each small one in his larger ones. "Listen to me," he said softly but firmly. "This is not a test. You are not being judged. You are not fighting for a place in my life, I am fighting for a place in yours. I will not let anyone take you from me, and nothing you say will change how I feel about keeping you safe." Lily's chin wobbled. "But people never choose us," she whispered. "They always choose something else. Or someone else. Or nothing at all." Ethan leaned closer, brushing a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "Then those people failed you," he said. "And that will not happen again. I choose you both. Every day. In every way. No question could ever make me change my mind." Sophie crawled closer to him, pressing her forehead into his shoulder. "Promise?" she asked in a voice so small it almost disappeared into the fabric of his shirt. "I promise," he said. "With everything I have." The next day brought a new round of preparations. The social workers conducted another home visit, this time observing how the girls interacted with Ethan. They watched as Sophie shyly reached for his hand when she wanted to show him her drawing. They observed Lily tugging on his sleeve to ask a question about the toy castle he had bought them earlier that week. They noticed the way Ethan instinctively bent toward the twins when speaking to them, lowering his voice to a calming tone he rarely used with adults. And, most importantly, they witnessed how the girls stayed close to him at all times, drawn to him not with fear but with trust. Dr. Morris took Ethan aside afterward. "They're attached to you," she said simply. "And they're beginning to believe they can rely on you." Ethan exhaled slowly. "I want them to know they can." Later that evening, after the staff left and the suite once again belonged to the three of them, the twins asked if they could sleep in his room. They had never asked before. Ethan hesitated for only a heartbeat, then nodded. He brought blankets to the floor beside his bed and helped them arrange a little nest where they could feel safe, close enough to see him and know he wasn't going anywhere. When he turned off the lights, Sophie whispered through the darkness, "Mr. Ethan? Are you awake?" "I am," he answered quietly. There was a brief silence before she said, "If we had a dad, I think he would feel like you." Ethan froze, the words reverberating through him with a force he didn't expect. Before he could gather a response, Lily added, "We feel safe with you. Safer than we've ever felt." An emotion he couldn't name rose in his throat, something warm, fierce, protective, and unbearably tender. He sat up slightly, looking toward the two small shapes curled beneath the blankets. "You deserve to feel safe," he said softly. "Every day. For the rest of your lives." Lily reached out from beneath her blanket, her small hand searching for his. He took it gently. Sophie did the same, and soon their two tiny hands were wrapped around his fingers. In that quiet moment, in the stillness of the night, Ethan understood something with clarity that startled him. He wasn't simply caring for two girls who needed a protector. He was becoming someone they loved. Someone they trusted. Someone they saw as family. And the realization didn't scare him. It grounded him. It strengthened him. And it made him more determined than ever to win the final battle ahead. For Lily and Sophie, he would go to the ends of the earth. Because somewhere along the way, somewhere between the cold steps of his hotel and the warm light of this room, they had become his family too. The morning of the custody hearing arrived wrapped in a quiet tension that clung to every corner of the penthouse. Snow fell thick and slow against the windows, softening the city below, but inside the suite, nothing felt soft. Lily and Sophie woke earlier than usual, too anxious to sleep, their small bodies wound tight with fear as they sat on the edge of the couch wearing the new matching dresses Ethan had bought them for the court. Lily's was a pale lavender and Sophie's a soft blue, and though they looked beautiful, both girls tugged nervously at the hems as if unsure they deserved to wear something so lovely. Ethan knelt in front of them to fix the tiny bows on their braids, but even his steady hands could not ease the tremble in their shoulders. He tried to reassure them with gentle words, telling them he would be right beside them the entire time, that nothing would happen without him there, but the trauma of past abandonments clung too tightly for comfort to settle easily. When they finally left the room, each girl held one of Ethan's hands, their small fingers gripping him with desperate determination, as if worried he might disappear if they blinked. The courthouse was cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. The hallways smelled faintly of old paper and disinfectant, and the heavy wooden doors loomed overhead like gates to a world too big and too formal for two trembling 5-year-olds. As Ethan carried Sophie in one arm and kept Lily pressed close to his side, he felt the weight of every eye that turned to watch them, curious about the billionaire escorting two frightened children through the legal labyrinth. Dr. Morris greeted them with a warm smile meant to soothe the twins, but even she couldn't disguise the seriousness of the day. The courtroom itself was a large, polished chamber with high ceilings and rows of benches. It dwarfed the twins instantly. Lily clung to Ethan's coat sleeve while Sophie buried her face in his shoulder, refusing to look at the unfamiliar faces around them. Ethan sat down with both girls pressed to him, his arm wrapped protectively around their backs. His attorney leaned in to whisper updates and strategies, but Ethan barely heard the words. All he cared about was making sure the twins didn't feel alone. When the hearing began, the judge reviewed the case with calm authority, acknowledging the girls' history, the circumstances of their loss, their recent disappearance, and their abrupt arrival at the Harrington Grand. Lily and Sophie listened silently, their eyes wide and fearful, not understanding every term but understanding too well the stakes. When Dr. Morris spoke about the girls' emotional state, their attachment to Ethan, and the trauma they had endured, Sophie's lip began to tremble. Ethan gently squeezed her hand, giving her courage. The judge then requested that the twins be allowed to answer a few simple questions. Ethan tensed, knowing how fragile they were, but the girls surprised him. They nodded, trusting his quiet assurance that he wouldn't leave their side. Lily went first. She spoke softly, answering questions with heartbreaking honesty. She explained how their mother died, how the shelter separated children, how she and Sophie ran away because they couldn't bear to be torn apart. She described the cold nights, the hunger, the fear of sleeping alone. And then, when asked about Ethan, her voice shifted, growing steadier as she said, "We weren't safe until he found us. He didn't yell. He didn't scare us. He didn't make us leave. He kept us warm. He kept us together. He made us feel like we matter." The courtroom fell silent. Sophie was asked if she wanted to say anything. She hesitated, gripping Ethan's fingers so tightly her knuckles turned white. Then she whispered something so quiet the judge had to ask her to repeat it. Sophie lifted her head slightly, her voice trembling but filled with raw truth. "We finally feel safe," she said. "And we want to stay with him. Please don't send us away again. We won't survive it." Ethan's heart broke and rebuilt itself all at once. When it came time for Ethan to speak, he rose slowly, keeping a hand on the girl's shoulders. He addressed the court with a calm that belied the storm inside him. He spoke about finding the twins outside the hotel, about their fear, their hunger, and the way they clung to each other as if the world might rip them apart at any second. He spoke of how they trusted him, something he didn't take lightly, and how their presence had changed him profoundly. He admitted that he had not expected to become attached, that he had not planned to seek custody, but that once the girls had entered his life, he realized he could not imagine letting them go. His voice deepened as he said, "I am not asking for pity or indulgence. I'm asking for the chance to give these girls what they have never had, stability, safety, and unconditional care. They deserve a home. And I want, more than anything, to give them one." The judge listened thoughtfully, his expression unreadable as he shuffled the documents before him. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Lily reached for Ethan's hand. Sophie leaned her head against his arm, eyes tightly shut. Ethan felt the weight of their trust settle over him like a mantle. Finally, the judge looked up. After reviewing the evidence, observing the relationship between Mr. Harrington and the minors, and considering the best interests of the children, he began, pausing as the twins squeezed Ethan's hands tighter, "It is the court's decision to grant Mr. Ethan Harrington full and permanent custody of Lily and Sophie Carter." Both girls gasped. Sophie covered her mouth with her hands as tears spilled down